Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to discover a side of the German nature you've definitely never seen before. We'll explore 4 different survival experts that live in small, temporary puddles across Germany. Peaceful herbivores, agile dancers, creative architects, and ferocious predators. Let's dive right in. There is a specific stillness in the woods right after a warm spring rain. The air is heavy with the scent of the damp earth, and the only sound is the rhythmic crunch of wet leaves under my shoes, and the occasional splash from my dog Django as he waves through the brush.
Hey Django! Come here! Come here!
Most people walk right past these muddy, leaf-filled puddles next to the trail, seeing them as nothing more than a temporary obstacle. But if you stop, kneel down, and wait for the slid to settle, you'll realize you're looking into a fleeting, secret world. These are ephemeral ponds, worlds that exist for only a few weeks before the summer heat arrives to claim them. It's here, in these tea-colored patches of water, that I found a group of animals that seem to belong to another era entirely. The first thing you will notice, if you look closely enough, is a shape that seems almost too delicate to be real. This is the European fairyshrimp. If these ponds were a stage, the fairyshrimp would be the ballerinas. They swim gracefully on their backs, their translucent bodies shimmering with a ghostly glow as they glide through the shadows of submerged leaves. Watching them is a meditative experience. They move with a constant, rhythmic motion of their many appendages, filtering the water for microscopic life. But their grace masks an incredible toughness. The most remarkable part of their biology is how they handle the fact that their world is destined to disappear. As the pond will eventually dry up, the adults will perish. But they leave behind biological time capsules called cysts. These resting eggs are masterworks of survival. They can lie dormant in the dry, cracked mud for years, surviving both the deep freezes of our German winters and the parching heat of our hot summers. They wait for the exact moment the rain returns to wake them up. It's a desperate, beautiful race against the time to hatch, grow, and lay the next generation before the water evaporates once again. It makes you wonder how many of those ghosts are sleeping beneath our feet every time we take a walk in the woods. To think that these creatures have been known to science since the mid-19th century, yet most people will live their lives without ever seeing one, is mind-blowing to me. Scientists first formally described European fairyshrimp back in the 1860s, but in reality they are echoes of a much older world. They are scattered across Central and Northern Europe, but they are incredibly picky about where they choose to wake up. They require these specific, undisturbed floodplain forests, habitats that are becoming increasingly rare in Germany.
Fine!
In a way, finding them here in this local patch of woods near Frankfurt is a sign that the ancient rhythm of the landscape is still beating, if only faintly. One of the most alien things about them is how they perceive their world. If you look closely at their heads, you'll see 2 prominent black or orange eyes sitting on the ends of stalks. It gives them a panoramic view of their surroundings, which is vital because unlike us, they spend their entire lives swimming upside down. By keeping their ventral side, their belly so to say, facing the light, they can better coordinate the movement of those 11 pairs of legs. This constant, undulating wave of limbs isn't just for movement. It creates a miniature current that funnels microscopic algae and organic particles towards their mouths. They are essentially living filters, cleaning the very water they call home. There's a certain vulnerability to their beauty though. Unlike many other crustaceans, fairyshrimp are completely soft-bodied. They have no hard shell, no claws for defense, and no way to burrow themselves into the safety of the mud. They rely entirely on the fact that these temporary pools usually don't support large fish that would make a quick meal out of them, which is actually frequently the case in the aquarium hobby. They are the undisputed masters of the open water in this tiny, sun-dappled pond. Or at least, that's how it appears at first glance. But as we sit here, captivated by the delicate dance, we start to notice a change in the water's energy. While the fairy shrimp dominate the upper layers of the pool, they aren't actually alone in this race against time. Down in the shadows of the leaf litter, tucked away in the deep slit, where the light barely reaches, something else is moving. It doesn't share the fairy shrimp's grace. It's something heavier, something armored. A prehistoric hunter that has been waiting in the mud just as long as the shrimp have. Even as these ballerinas glide through the water, they are being watched by a silent, ancient predator that is perfectly designed to turn this peaceful scene into a struggle for survival for the little shrimp. I didn't see it at first, but once you spot the movement in the muck, you realize that for a fairy shrimp, this pond is a much more dangerous place than it looks at first glance. But more about that predator later. As we move deeper into the slit and the decaying leaves of this pond, we find a neighbor that lives a very different, perhaps more grounded life. This is the mayfly nymph. While the fairy shrimp are the ghosts of the open water, the mayfly nymph is the peaceful gardener of the pond floor. They are specialized collectors, splendidly adapted to grazing on the thin layers of algae and the organic detritus that coats every submerged surface, so-called biofilm. It's fascinating to watch them because they have such a unique way of experiencing the waters. Unlike us, or even the fish that might occasionally wander these pools, mayflies breathe through their sides. If you look closely at their abdomen, you'll see delicate, leaf-like structures flickering. These are their gills. They actually fan them in a rhythmic, almost hypnotic motion, like tiny oars, to keep a constant flow of oxygen-rich water moving over their bodies. Their life story is one of the most interesting in the insect world, in my opinion at least. They spend months or even years underwater as these nymphs, growing and molting, all for a few hours of flight as an adult. If you've been following the channel for a while, you might remember these guys from my resurrection bowl video. I kept a few in this tiny ecosystem to see how they'd interact with the snails and plants. And seeing them graze in real time is a constant reminder of how much work goes into staying alive in an oxygen-low environment like this. But while the mayflies are the gardeners, there's another shape moving around the twigs. Something that doesn't look like an animal at first, but rather like a bundle of debris that has legs. This is a caddisfly larva. If the mayflies are the gardeners, these are the architects of the pond. Caddisfly larvae are famous for a behavior that feels almost human. They build their own homes. Using a specialized silk they produce from glands near their mouths, a silk that stays sticky even underwater, they painstakingly glue together bits of sand, small ticks, or even tiny dead tree leaves to create a protective casing. Each species has its own style. Some build smooth, tapering tubes of sand, while others create rugged fortresses of leaf fragments, like these here. These cases aren't just for protection against predators. They also act as a weight to keep the larvae from being swept away by currents and, more importantly, they help with breeding. By undulating their bodies inside the tube, they pull water through the case, ensuring their gills are always getting fresh oxygen. Watching a caddisfly move is like watching a tiny mobile home crawling across the pond floor. They are incredibly meticulous in their construction, choosing just the right pebble or stick to fit the next gap in their armor. However, as impressive as these architects and gardeners are, they all share the space with the undisputed king of the puddle. And this is what I honestly never expected to see here in the wild in Germany. Looking into the water, you'd swear you were looking at a miniature horseshoe crab. It has that unmistakable shield-like shell and a long, delicate tail that looks like it belongs into a museum. When I first saw these, I was certain they were close relatives of the crabs we see on the coasts. But as I did more research, I realized I was looking at a beautiful example of convergent evolution. They aren't related to horseshoe crabs at all. They've simply arrived at the same effective architectural design because it works so well for living in the slit. This is Lepidurus apus, the tadpole shrimp. This creature is a true living fossil in every sense of the word. While we usually talk about species evolving over millions of years, Lepidurus apus has stayed in this exact morphology for over 200 million years now. That means, while the first dinosaurs were just beginning to claim the land, this little shrimp was already swimming in pools exactly like this one. It has survived mass extinctions and the shifting of continents without needing to change a single thing about its body. It is a biological masterpiece that has outlasted almost everything else on Earth. Watching them move through the tea-colored water is a lesson in biological efficiency. They don't have lungs or traditional fish gills. Instead, they breathe through their legs. These many pairs of leaf-like appendages, known as phylopodia, act as oars for swimming and delicate respiratory surface to pull oxygen from the water. As they glide along the bottom, they are constant opportunistic feeders. They are the ultimate cleanup crew, tirelessly scavenging for algae and organic detritus. But they are also capable hunters, catching smaller invertebrates that find themselves trapped in these drying ponds. Catching smaller invertebrates that find themselves trapped in these drying pools. There's something deeply humbling about seeing them in person. It feels like stepping back into the Triassic period. It's a reminder that right here in our own backyards, in a puddle that most people would just walk past, there's an ancient and thriving ecosystem waiting to be explored. These ponds aren't just muddy holes. They are galleries of ancient design and tiny, hardworking life. I'm curious, have you ever stumbled across these ancient survivors in the wild? Or is this the first time you've heard of tadpole shrimp and fairyshrimp living in the forests of Germany and Europe? Let me know in the comments below. Watching them work is a lesson in patience. They move with a methodological intensity, using those shield-like carapaces to plow through the top layer of the pond bed. As they sift through the fine debris, they aren't just looking for food. They are rearranging the very landscape of their world, stirring up nutrients that have been locked away in the silt for months or even years. It's a constant, rhythmic churn that reminds me of a miniature mirror carp that we have discovered in the last video, driven by an ancient hunger that hasn't changed in eons. Not all of them look the same either. Some carry a deep, mossy green or a mottled brownish hue that makes them nearly invisible against the submerged stones. As one crawls slowly across the jagged rock, you can see how its camouflage is perfectly tuned to the shadows of the forest floor. These colors were first noted by naturalists in the 1700s already. They were baffled by how such a complex creature could simply appear in a forest puddle. It's as if they were part of the geology itself, a living extension of the stone and mud that surrounds them. Nearby, another individual caught my eye, a striking variant with a vibrant red tint to its long, bifurcated tail. It was digging aggressively into a thick bank of decaying leaf litter, burying its head deep into the organic matter. This isn't just foraging, it's a desperate search for high-protein snacks or perhaps the perfect spot to deposit those precious, drought-resistant eggs. The contrast of the red tail against the dark, rotting oak leaves is one of the few flashes of brilliant color in this otherwise muted and tea-colored world. On a nearby flat stone, two of them have found a temporary place to rest. Though in this world, resting is always relative. They sit there, chilling in the shallowest part of the pool where the water is slightly warmer. Their many legs never truly stopping as they sweep the surface of the rock for microscopic biofilm. In a drying pond, every square inch of space becomes a premium. Yet, these two seem indifferent to one another, focused entirely on the task of fueling their rapid growth before the sun dries out their home and kills them all. Then, emerging from a deeper shadow, I saw an individual that felt like the true sovereign of this silt. It was darker than the others, almost charcoal in color, with piercing red spots near the front of its head that looked like glowing eyes. These aren't just for show. While they have two main compound eyes, they also possess a third, simpler, knobblier eye in the center, helping them detect changes in light and shadow from above. For nearly 2 minutes, I watched this giant navigate a treacherous rocky surface. Every moment was calculated. It didn't scuttle like a modern crab. It glided with heavy prehistoric dignity. You can see the wear and tear on its shell, the scars of a life lived in a sprint. In this moment, the 200 million years of the history doesn't feel like a dry statistic from a textbook. It feels like a tangible, breathing reality. You are looking at a creature that has outlasted the rise and fall of the Alps, the arrival of the first forests, the reign of the dinosaurs, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and so much more history. It is a master of a very specific, very difficult niche. And its dark, armored form is proof that sometimes nature gets it right the first time. But even a king has its rivals. As this dark shrimp rounded a corner of the rock, it came face to face with another nightmare of the shallow. A giant water bug. These are the heavyweights of the pond, notorious for their predatory prowess and their agonizingly painful bite. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The water bug, with its powerful grasping forelegs, and the tadpole shrimp, protected by its ancient shield, were two different philosophies of survival clashing in a single puddle. It's a high-stakes standoff, and most people would walk right over without a second thought. But there, under the surface, it's a drama of life and death that has been playing out since the Triassic. It's a humbling reminder that these muddy holes are actually battlegrounds of evolutionary perfection. A huge thank you goes out to our channel members: Julius, Dottie, JVP, Ryder Cedric, and Belgium Bugs. Your commitment keeps these stories alive. Another special thanks goes to Lorenz for providing the breathtaking underwater footage that allowed us to peer into the secret world. Without your support, this project would not have been possible. If you found this glimpse into our local waters fascinating, please consider sharing this video with a friend who shares a passion for the diverse life found in German ponds. To continue your journey through the microscopic and majestic worlds of our waterways, you can click on the video to the right to discover the strange micro-creatures inhabiting the Neckar River, or explore the other featured video on the left. Thanks for watching.